In the intricate dance of global geopolitics and economic strategy, significant crack has appeared in the European Union's united front against Russia. The EU's third-largest economy, Italy, is now publicly sounding the alarm, questioning the very efficacy of the sanctions regime designed to cripple Moscow. At the heart of this dissent is a sobering assessment. 19 successive packages of sanctions have not only failed to bring Russia to its knees, but have, in a deeply ironic twist, boomeranged to weaken Europe's own economic foundations. This sentiment, articulated with stark clarity by Italian Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini, suggests that the sanctions are proving counterproductive, inflicting more harm on the European economy than on their intended target, and forcing ordinary citizens to bear the brunt of soaring energy prices. This development isn't merely a dissenting voice. It's a fundamental challenge to the prevailing Western strategy, raising critical questions about the long-term viability and unintended consequences of economic warfare in the 21st century. As we delve into this unfolding narrative, we must analyze the data, scrutinize the claims, and understand the complex interplay of economic pain, political calculus, and shifting geopolitical alliances. The current landscape of sanctions is the culmination of years of escalating pressure from both the European Union and the United States. This sustained campaign has been aimed at strategically pressuring Moscow by targeting its most critical economic lifelines. The primary focus has been on severing Russia's access to vital sectors, including its massive energy industry, its intricate financial networks, its advanced defense and military-industrial complex, and its access to dual-use and high-end technology. This multi-pronged assault was meticulously designed to isolate the Russian economy, degrade its war-making capabilities, and compel a change in its foreign policy. To date, this has manifested in a staggering 19 distinct packages of sanctions levied by the EU alone, each one progressively tightening the screws and attempting to close any perceived loopholes. This relentless and incremental approach was intended to create a suffocating economic environment for the Kremlin, demonstrating the collective resolve of the West. However, the sheer volume of these measures also highlights a persistent challenge: the need to continuously adapt and escalate the sanctions in response to Russia's own countermeasures and its ability to find alternative economic pathways. The journey from the first package to the 19th is a testament to the dynamic and evolving nature of this economic conflict. A high-stakes chess match played out on the global stage with entire economies as the pieces. From within this framework of supposed Western unity, a potent and skeptical perspective has emerged from Rome, articulated by a key figure in one of the EU's founding member states. In a recent and widely reported statement, Matteo Salvini, who holds the dual roles of Italian Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Transport and Infrastructure, voiced profound doubts about the entire sanctions strategy. His critique is not a nuanced call for minor adjustments, but a fundamental questioning of the policy's core effectiveness. Salvini's position represents a significant political fissure within the EU, moving beyond quiet diplomatic grumblings to a public declaration of dissent. He frames the sanctions not as a tool of effective foreign policy, but as a self-inflicted wound. This perspective from a senior minister in the Eurozone's third-largest economy carries substantial weight, signaling that the consensus on isolating Russia may be more fragile than it appears. It reflects a growing unease among certain European constituencies who are feeling the direct economic repercussions of the policy, and are beginning to question whether the strategic gains, if any, justify the immense costs being incurred at home. Salvini's skepticism is a crucial data point, indicating a potential shift in the political and economic calculus that has underpinned the EU's response to the conflict. Delving deeper into his critique, Mr. Salvini laid out a stark assessment of what he termed a double impact. He argued that after nearly 4 years of sustained conflict and the implementation of 19 separate and increasingly stringent sanctions packages, the intended outcome, the subjugation of the Russian state, has failed to materialize. Instead, the opposite has occurred. He contends that these measures have inadvertently triggered a significant weakening of the European economy, creating a drag on growth and competitiveness across the continent. Simultaneously, he pointed to a direct and painful consequence for his own constituents. Energy prices for Italian households and businesses have become markedly more expensive, directly eroding disposable income and corporate profitability. This dual blow, as he describes it, paints a picture of a policy that is not only failing to achieve its geopolitical objectives, but is actively undermining the economic well-being of the very nations imposing it. In light of this analysis, the Italian leader issued a strong call for caution, particularly regarding the escalating rhetoric around rearmament and the continuous flow of arms aid. His message implies a need to reassess priorities, suggesting that Europe's current path risks further economic destabilization without delivering the desired strategic victory, a classic case of the supposed cure being worse than the disease. Furthermore, Salvini reframed the entire security paradigm that has dominated European discourse. In his view, the preoccupation with a threat from the East, personified by Russia, is a strategic miscalculation. He argued that the real and perhaps more immediate existential threat to Europe's security and social fabric does not originate from the East, but from the South. Explicitly identified the primary source of this threat as the uncontrolled and large-scale flows of illegal migration across the Mediterranean. This perspective fundamentally challenges the prevailing NATO and EU narrative, which has overwhelmingly prioritized countering Russian aggression. By redirecting the focus southward, Salvini is advocating for a radical reprioritization of Europe's security resources and political attention. He suggests that while the continent is focused on a conventional military standoff, it is neglecting a demographic and social challenge that he believes poses a more direct and corrosive danger to its internal stability. This call to pivot security priorities is a highly contentious stance, but it resonates with a segment of the European populace concerned about immigration, border control, and the integration of new arrivals, adding another layer of complexity to the already fraught debate over the continent's future direction. Despite these vocal concerns about the reverse impact and the growing dissent within its own ranks, the European Union's institutional apparatus continues to press forward, demonstrating a commitment to tightening the economic vice on Moscow. The primary focus of the more recent measures has shifted towards a more granular and sophisticated objective, targeting Russia's elaborate attempts to circumvent the existing sanctions. This indicates an acknowledgement by Brussels that Moscow has become adept at finding workarounds and that the initial broader sanctions are no longer sufficient. The latest sanctions package, announced on December 15th, exemplifies this new approach. It zeroes in on a critical component of Russia's economic resilience: its oil interests. Specifically, the package adds 9 new individuals and corporate entities to the sanctions list, all of whom are linked to supporting Russia's burgeoning Shadow Fleet, a clandestine network of tankers operating outside the purview of Western insurance financing and maritime services created specifically to transport Russian oil to global markets in defiance of price caps and embargoes. This move signals a more targeted phase of the economic war, focusing on disrupting the logistical and financial architecture that enables Russia to continue profiting from its most lucrative export. Among the individuals targeted in this latest round of sanctions are 2 prominent oil traders, Murtaza Lakhani and Edibar Ayub. EU authorities have accused both men of playing instrumental roles in helping the Russian state circumvent the stringent sanctions imposed on its crude oil exports. These are not low-level operatives. They are alleged to be key facilitators in a global network designed to keep Russian oil flowing. Murtaza Lakhani, in particular, faces a more severe accusation. He is alleged to have directly assisted the CEO of Rosneft, one of the world's largest oil companies, in establishing a complex web of shell companies and intermediary firms. This network's primary purpose, according to the EU, was to obscure the origin of Russian oil supplies and secure their delivery to international buyers, thereby neutralizing the impact of Western restrictions. By sanctioning these individuals, the EU aims to disrupt the human expertise and personal networks that are just as crucial as physical assets in the shadow oil trade. The goal is to create a chilling effect, making it riskier and more difficult for facilitators and middlemen to do business with sanctioned Russian entities, thereby increasing the friction and cost of every transaction. The scope of the new sanctions, however, extends beyond the realm of oil trading. The EU is also targeting other vectors of Russian state activity that it deems destabilizing. The list includes individuals allegedly involved in orchestrating sophisticated disinformation campaigns aimed at sowing discord within European societies and undermining public trust in democratic institutions. It also targets perpetrators of cyber attacks against European infrastructure and government bodies, reflecting the growing importance of the digital battlefield in a more conventional military sense. The sanctions now encompass Russia's 142nd Independent Electronic Warfare Battalion. By sanctioning this specific military unit, the EU is signaling its intent to degrade Russia's capabilities in a critical and highly technical area of modern warfare. Electronic warfare, which involves disrupting enemy communications, radar, and guidance systems, is a key force multiplier on the battlefield. This multifaceted approach targeting oil logistics, disinformation agents, cyber attackers, and specialized military units demonstrates the EU's evolving strategy, which seeks to counter the full spectrum of Russia's hybrid warfare tactics, not just its economic base. In the face of this unprecedented and sustained economic pressure, Russia has demonstrated a level of adaptability that has surprised many Western analysts. The Russian economy, despite being subjected to an astonishing tally of over 30,000 individual sanctions from various countries, has shown remarkable resilience. Official estimates and forecasts from institutions like the IMF paint a picture not of an economy in collapse, but one that is reorienting and, in some respects, thriving under pressure. For 2023, Russia's GDP growth was estimated to be a robust 3.6%. To put this figure into perspective, this growth rate is faster than that of any single nation within the G7. The group of leading Western industrialized economies that are spearheading the sanctions campaign, this stark economic data challenges the narrative that sanctions are successfully crippling the Russian economy. Instead, it suggests that a combination of massive state spending, import substitution, and a reorientation of trade has allowed Russia to weather the storm and even achieve a level of wartime economic expansion, a phenomenon that demands a serious reassessment of the sanctions' true impact. A key pillar of this resilience has been Russia's successful adaptation in its global trade patterns, particularly in the energy sector. Despite Western embargoes and the G7 price cap, Russia continues to export millions of barrels of oil every single day. The primary destinations for this crude have shifted dramatically from Europe to Asia, with India and China emerging as the largest buyers. This massive redirection of trade has been facilitated by the aforementioned shadow fleet, this vast armada of aging tankers, operating with opaque ownership structures and non-Western insurance. Sales outside the traditional Western-dominated shipping lanes and financial systems. This parallel logistics network has effectively allowed Russia to bypass the West's primary enforcement mechanisms, ensuring a steady flow of petrodollars to the Kremlin's coffers. This trade adaptation is a clear demonstration of how global markets can reconfigure in response to geopolitical pressures, creating new alliances and supply chains that operate independently of Western control, thereby fundamentally limiting the reach and power of sanctions. From Moscow's vantage point, the EU's latest sanctions are viewed with a mixture of defiance and disdain. Russia's permanent mission to the European Union issued a statement asserting that these new measures are futile and will ultimately only inflict further harm upon the citizens of the EU themselves. The Russian argument is that the sanctions will exacerbate the socio-economic problems already plaguing Europe, such as inflation and a cost-of-living crisis, without achieving any meaningful change in Russian policy. This perspective is echoed by a growing body of analysis, which suggests that the sanctions policy has had significant and perhaps detrimental, unintended consequences for the West. One prominent argument is that the policy has inadvertently prompted President Putin to accelerate and deepen Russia's strategic pivot towards China and other non-Western partners, fostering the very multipolar world order that the West has long sought to prevent. Concurrently, by cutting itself off from Russian energy, Europe has become more strategically dependent on the United States for its energy security, particularly through imports of more expensive liquefied natural gas (LNG). This complex outcome, a more resilient Russia, a more entrenched Sino-Russian alliance, and a more dependent euro, raises profound questions about who is truly winning this protracted economic war. The entire episode serves as a powerful case study in the limits of economic statecraft and the unpredictable ripple effects of sanctions in a deeply interconnected global economy.